Hello and welcome to our revision video on homeostasis, including controlling blood glucose levels. As always, you're going to need a pen and a piece of paper because there will be points during the video that I'm going to ask you to pause while you consider your answers and potentially write down what you think would be a correct answer, and then you will go back and have a check at that point and see whether or not you're right. I'm going to go through all the answers with you on the following slides, so you'll be able to see what the mark schemes were asking for. So homeostasis, what is homeostasis? We need a definition because they occasionally ask specifically for the definition. It is the regulation of the internal conditions of a cell or organism. Sometimes people remember it as the maintenance of a constant internal environment, but we've got to make sure we've got that word internal in there, all right? The maintenance of the environment is outside, and that doesn't make any sense, okay? So it's the regulation of the internal conditions of a person or an organism, the maintenance of a constant internal environment. So why do we have to do it? It maintains the optimum conditions for function of an organism. So that could be for enzymes to work. They need specific pHs or specific temperatures. It could also be in terms of water balance and things like that. So we have to maintain our water balance throughout the body, making sure our cells aren't becoming turgid or plasmalized, and it's in response to internal and external changes. So it only happens, we only see homeostasis and this kind of negative feedback if you're a higher tier student. We only see that in response to a change, whether that's an internal change because you've done something and the internal conditions of your body have changed, or whether that's an external change outside based on something around you in your environment. So what we're looking at here is a diagram of the endocrine system. The endocrine system is all of the organs that are involved in producing hormones within our bodies, and there's a few of them that are involved in different parts of that, and they're linked into a couple of different topics that you guys have done already. So this is the pituitary gland in the brain. The pituitary gland in the brain produces FSH and LH for the reproductive cycle in females, the menstrual cycle. It also produces a couple of other hormones. There's quite a few of them are made in the pituitary gland actually, but they're going to be involved in different systems within our bodies. The second one down here is the thymus, or the thyroid gland just above the thymus is specifically what we're looking at. And this one produces thyroxine. It's all to do with metabolism, so it's to do with building up and breaking down of substances within the body. These are the adrenal glands on the top of the kidneys. They produce the fight or flight hormone adrenaline, which you've probably heard of. Adrenaline, when we're put in a situation that we are uncomfortable with, adrenaline will either tell us that, or will force our brain to start considering whether we would like to run away or whether we need to prepare our body to fight. But it starts to make us ready for either of those actions, to prepare for some kind of physical exertion, one way or the other. We have the pancreas here. Now, the pancreas is a complicated one because you've obviously learned about the pancreas as part of the digestive system. As part of the endocrine system, we're not talking about enzymes. So we're not, that's the digestive system. The pancreas in the endocrine system produces insulin and glucagon, and it's involved in blood glucose regulation. We have the uterus just below that, the uterus with both of its ovaries on either side. The ovaries are involved in estrogen production for the female menstrual cycle. Okay, I don't know why I always say female menstrual cycle, because there's no such thing as a male menstrual cycle, but it only happens in females. And the estrogen is involved in building up the uterus lining to make it thicker and capable of accepting an egg. And finally, we have the testes. So the testes are involved in testosterone production. Testosterone is obviously the male hormone that encourages muscle growth, and some of the changes that we see in males during puberty. So we've got a couple of kind of simple questions on here that you would be expected to be able to answer, all right? If you're wanting to, at this point now, we need to pause the video. If you want to have a go at these questions and then check them, you're going to need to pause the video and have a try of those questions. When you come back and you play again, I'm going to go through some answers for these ones here, but these are just checking to make sure that you kind of understand a little bit about hormones and what they do in the body. Okay, so a hormone, for those of you that have just replayed the video and are waiting for some answers, a hormone is a chemical messenger. It's a chemical substance. Travels in the blood, okay? Travels in the blood around the body. It causes a change in a target organ, all right? And there's marks available for pretty much all four of those things. There is a chemical messenger produced by a gland. We could add to that as well, produced by a gland, travels in the blood, causes a change in a target organ. Name the effector that releases a hormone. That would be a gland. A gland. There's only two types of effectors that we learn about. If we're talking about the nervous system, then the effector might be a muscle. If we're talking about the endocrine system, the effector is going to be a gland. Hormones bind to a target organ. How do they travel to the target organ? In the bloodstream. Okay, so they're going to go in your blood. So we're just going to compare here nervous and hormonal control. Now we know for your pre-release information that for the exams that nervous control isn't on your exam, but hormonal control is. Okay, so if you wanted to, you could completely ignore all of the nervous control stuff. I think it's worth knowing, at least being able to compare these two so that you can start to think about what hormonal control actually looks like in the body. If you want to sit and make some notes on hormonal control and how it's different to nervous control, you could pause the video and do that now. Okay, so we're going to compare nervous control and hormonal control. Nervous control, we're talking about neurons, okay, and transport of electrical signals to effectors. Where in hormonal control, one of the things, again, these are things people frequently get mixed up. In hormonal control, we're talking about the bloodstream, and we're talking about chemicals, hormones, okay, to target cells, which are produced by a gland. These chemicals are produced by a gland and transported in the blood. The target cells are not going to be a muscle or a gland like they were in the nervous system. So this nervous control is a localized response. It's specifically sending an electrical signal to an effector, like a muscle in the leg or a muscle in the arm. Where in hormonal control, this is a widespread response. The hormone travels all around the body in the blood, so anywhere that it can attach to a receptor, bind to a receptor, and start a response, it will do that. Okay, at any place that it goes as it's carried in the blood. So nervous control is rapid, happens very, very quickly, but it only has a short impact. It's a very quick contraction of the muscles, and then obviously it's finished. Where hormonal control takes a lot longer because the hormone has to travel in the bloodstream, but it lasts a lot longer. So again, we're just kind of summing up along here, and if you want to try and test yourself, if you want to test your understanding of this, you could stop the video now, pause the video now, and fill in the missing parts of this table. Okay, so we can see some answers just popping up here. Again, these are summing up the stuff that we've just done on the previous slide. This is just practice for you guys. Okay, so we're going to move on and we're going to have a little look at blood sugar regulation and specifically the pancreas here, because we have two hormones that are going to be produced. We've got insulin and, if you're higher tier, glucagon. So when our blood sugar goes up after we've just had a meal, our blood sugar levels increase. We're going to be talking about insulin and its effects. When our blood sugar levels go down, maybe it's quite a while since we've eaten or we've been exercising, our blood sugar levels are going to go down. The glucose is going to be used up in respiration, which means we're going to need some more glucose from somewhere. Fortunately, for anybody who doesn't have diabetes, you have some stored and ready to use. So what actually happens here when we've just eaten a meal? Our blood glucose levels are going to increase, blood sugar levels, and it's going to be detected by glucose receptors in the blood vessels. The pancreas releases insulin into the blood. Insulin causes the liver cells to store glucose as glycogen. So the glucose gets converted into glycogen and stored in the liver or the muscles. All right, this brings down our blood sugar levels because it's no longer in the blood, it's now in the liver or the muscles. Obviously, then hours later, we might find that we are in between meals and we are running short on sugar in our blood. So what we're then going to have happen is the higher tier stuff in glucagon. All right, but if you're foundation tier student, this is as much as you need to know here. Your blood glucose is going to return to a normal level and the pancreas stops releasing insulin. Okay, so this one could be used in a couple of different ways. I am going to go through the answers in a second that go into here. You can find them on the slide, so this isn't particularly complicated. If you want to take just a minute here to work out which words should go in there, then pause the video and just have a go at putting those in. And otherwise, I'm going to go through some answers just for us to be able to see what a model answer should look like. So when blood glucose levels increase, this is detected by glucose receptors on the pancreas. The pancreas releases insulin into the blood. The insulin stimulates the liver or muscle cells to convert glucose into glycogen. And when blood glucose levels return to normal, the pancreas stops releasing insulin. Okay? What we're going to do next is we're going to have a go at an exam question and go through that exam question where this level of help isn't available. All right, so hopefully this will give you a bit of an idea of what you should be writing about. Okay, so if you are a foundation tier student, I would advise you to skip this entire slide. Okay, the top half of this is completely relevant on foundation tier. It's the stuff that we have just looked at, but the bottom half of it is higher content only. So for foundation and higher tier students, blood glucose levels go up. Receptors on the pancreas detect that change and they release insulin. The insulin is going to convert glucose into glycogen and store it in the liver or the muscles in the body, which is going to remove it from the bloodstream and therefore bring your blood glucose levels back down. When they come back down, insulin secretion is going to stop. We're going to stop producing insulin. If you are higher tier, you are also meant to know what happens when the blood glucose levels decrease. So when blood glucose levels go down, then they decrease. Receptors on the pancreas are going to detect this change, but this time they're going to release a hormone called glucagon. Glucagon does the opposite job of insulin. It converts the glycogen, long chains of sugar, back into glucose and releases it from the liver or the muscle cells back into the blood. Obviously, putting that glucose back into the blood is going to bring your blood sugar level back up. As it comes back up, glucagon secretion is going to stop because we are reaching normal blood glucose levels. This whole thing here is an example of negative feedback. So when something gets too low, our body responds to bring it back up again. And if it gets too high, our body responds to bring it back up again. Again, negative feedback is not on the foundation tier exam, but it is on the higher tier exam. Okay, so you could be asked about glucagon. Okay, so we're going to try a second question, and this one's going to be slightly harder because we've got none of that scaffolding, none of that extra help that you've seen on the previous questions. However, for this one here, if you are a foundation tier student, this would be out of 2 marks, not out of 4, as far as the mark scheme for this one goes. So I am going to let you pause the video here and have a try of this question, and the next thing you hear from me will be me going through some answers. I will specify what you should have written if you are foundation tier and also if you are higher tier. Okay, so in terms of the answers we're looking for, it's only the first 2 marks worth that could be found on a foundation paper. If you're a foundation tier student, you're looking for the first 2 here. If blood glucose is too high, insulin is released from the pancreas, so the glucose is moved or stored in the liver or the muscle cells, would get you 2 marks. If you're a higher tier student, there is a little bit extra that we can add here. Okay, it says if the blood glucose is too low, glucagon is released from the pancreas. It causes glycogen to be converted back into glucose, and it's released back into the blood. So it had been stored and it's now being given back into the blood, and that's going to bring your blood glucose levels back up. If you are a foundation tier student, that is everything that you need to know, and your video can be stopped here now. Everything from this point onwards is for higher tier students only. So we've got this second question. The cyclist's blood glucose concentration begins to decrease. Describe how the body responds when the blood glucose concentration begins to decrease. We're looking at when it goes down. I'm going to give you some time if you pause the video here to answer that question, then I'm going to go through some answers on the next slide. So the pancreas is going to detect that there is a low blood glucose. Those receptors on the pancreas is going to pick that up. The pancreas is going to produce glucagon. The glucagon is going to cause the conversion of glycogen back into glucose, and it's going to release it from the liver back in the muscle cells back into the blood. Okay, and that's what they were looking for on this one. So again, this question here is asking us about how negative feedback controls the blood glucose concentration during the first 1.5 hours after the meal. We have to talk about when the concentration of glucose becomes high and also when it becomes low. I'm going to let you pause the video and then I'm going to go through some answers. So anything from here could have been applicable to the previous graph. We can see when the glucose from the meal enters the blood is at 0 to 0.5 hours because we see a big increase in blood glucose. There's an increase up to 6.5 millimolars per decimeter cubed. The glucose is detected by the pancreas. The pancreas is going to secrete insulin. Insulin causes the glucose to move into the liver or the muscle cells, and it's converted to glycogen to be stored. That causes a fall in the blood glucose back to normal blood glucose levels. When there's low blood glucose detected by the pancreas, which does happen at one point on the graph, the pancreas is going to release glucagon. The liver is going to convert the glycogen back into glucose and put it back into the blood. which is going to cause the blood glucose level to rise again. And again, use some data to back up your point there. So that is the end of our video on blood glucose regulation and the endocrine system. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your revision. Goodbye for now.